Oh yeah? Well, I was thinking, I don't know where to start. I've never done anything like this before, but I have a few things written down. I guess the best thing to start with is maybe, I guess, tell us about what you know of the history of your mom and your dad coming to the country.
Well, of course, naturally it all started with my dad.
Right. And that's Frozen, right?
Well, he came, if you know, is that thing on now?
It's on, yeah. So you don't even have to look at it. Just, talk to me.
It all started with my dad came from Italy to America. What Anna tells me that they were very, my dad would come from a town called Chicano.
Chicano. Where is that? What part of Italy?
And that's probably, maybe, it could be, I guess, somewhere maybe a half hour or so from my mother's hometown of Frosinone.
Oh, okay.
See? And evidently, one way or another, Pop got hooked up with my mother, but he came to America in 1900.
1900.
Right.
Wow.
So then...
And they came in New Orleans, right? Didn't they come in that way?
No, they came right into New York.
New York. They came in Staten Island.
Into Ellis Island.
Ellis Island.
So then Pop, back then, in about 10 years later, come over here and got established and went to work. And then evidently through communication back to Italy, he went back over and met my mother, or he must have known my mother, and he married my mother.
And wanted to bring her to
brought her
here
in
America.
1910.
And what did he do? Do you remember? Do you know what they did for work whenever he first came over?
Yeah,
here?
when they first came to work here, he worked as a blacksmith in the steel mills and the railroads.
The steel mills and the railroads,
yeah.
huh?
That was the big thing why they were bringing a lot of immigrants here now. America was in the big period of more or less the great building of America with all these immigrants. And they all came in to build the railroads. They came
and the skyscrapers,
came in all over and all that stuff. See, so then then they were married and he come over. Then in about 1911, Anna was born.
1911.
Anna was born in 1911.
Wow. So 2001, last year she turned 90.
That's correct. She'll be 91 here in May. You know, it's ironic. Back in that day, you know, they didn't get all the assistance that people can get today.
You mean health assistance?
Any type of assistance. And like whenever one of the babies was born, I have two sisters dead. And we've got an 8 grave lot up in Wellsville, Ohio. They went from East Liverpool, Ohio, into Midland, Pennsylvania. But I guess Lena...
Well, they had them. I mean, back then, I mean, they still had babies at home in their house, right?
Oh, I'll guarantee
with midwives, they call them. Is that what they call them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So then Anna was born in Julia, and Julia was, I guess, the next one, and she was born somewhere up around Midland, Pennsylvania. Then they went to East Liverpool, Ohio. And from there they went to Wellsville, Ohio.
Wellsville, huh?
And but then whenever they had, one of my little sisters was very, very sick with the measles, and then Mom had to go, I think, like 3 city blocks to go to a drugstore to a man that had a telephone.
Wow.
To be able to call a doctor, but then the baby died.
And back then, yeah, the measles and the mumps and chickenpox, that could all kill you.
They called it German measles. And the baby died.
Wow.
And then Anna said, what I can remember most is that this man came with this great big old carriage and a horse and carriage, and they didn't have nobody, and just Mom and Anna and Dad and the funeral director. That's all there was to take his baby and bury it.
Wow. So then I guess that's where Doug and Anita got Julia's name.
Julia, yes, they're named from my sister Julia.
Right.
Julia never did get to see any of her grandchildren.
Huh.
That was a heartbreaker because she was a very,
name.
very lovely. Julia was wonderful, beautiful.
Wow.
She was a beautiful lady, my sister Julia.
So how old was she then?
Who, Julia?
Yeah, when that happened.
You mean Julia? Not really in age-wise. I don't know. These sisters were born in between my other sisters.
Right.
Because I was.
So they were really young.
Yeah, well, one sister left.
Right.
And 4 dead. And then it's funny that Anna was crying the other day when I was taking her home.
Oh gosh.
She says, please, she said, I hope I go before you do. She said, I couldn't stand the thought of you going and leaving me as the last one.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
So
I think that's how every older sibling feels, and how parents feel about their kids. Nobody wants to.
they don't, yeah, you don't
Nobody
want to see
wants
your
to,
children pass on. You know?
Yeah.
But anyhow, then they ended up that back here in Cumberland, my dad had a sister, and they evidently found out about a building that was for sale, and this Italian man had built this place, but when he built it, he didn't like it, and he didn't like America, and he wanted to go back.
And this was the place on Virginia Avenue,
And that's
right?
the place. So then my dad, then about, I guess somewhere maybe 1914, he got Ben, he brought Ben over, his brother,
Right.
Joe's daddy.
Yep. Uncle
Somewhere
Joe's
in
dad.
that area. So then Ben ended up in World War I. He was drafted into World War I.
Wow.
And so then later on, my mother made arrangements to bring her sister over to marry Ben. And that's how it is. Mom evidently arranged this marriage. And,
Right.
And we got her sister hooked up with my dad's brother.
So, I mean, was that just luck of the draw as far as I mean, they didn't do arranged marriages back then. It was just lucky that they had found somebody
I
for
think
them.
it's pretty well, or it's
Really?
pretty well arranged.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
They don't do that anymore, though, really.
Oh, you never
Do
know.
they?
I'm trying to get you guys.
Well, that's a whole different
I
story.
might try to hook you guys
Oh
up. You know?
gosh. Well, okay. So that's where the whole thing on Virginia Avenue started. What can you remember about that from your earliest memories
Oh,
of
my earliest-
who you ran with and what
Oh man,
Aunt
oh,
Anna
man.
and
Well,
were your
we
parents
grew up-
hard on you?
Well,
everything?
in the first place, you're talking about being born at home. Even back at that time, I was born right there on the avenue.
Yeah.
In fact, my dad was always very proud when I was little. And he'd say to me, you were born in Cumberland, Maryland. And he was very proud that I could say Cumberland, Maryland.
That you were
where I was
born in
And
America.
I was pretty spoiled, right on the avenue.
Yeah.
See? So then right upstairs on the second floor, I was born right there.
Huh.
And so then my dad had company one time. We had this great big kitchen table. And he said, Johnny, tell everybody where you were born. And I said, in my mother's bed. And it cracked up the place. My father would wake me to say Cumberland, Maryland. I was born in my mother's bed.
So he was proud that you were born in the U.S.
Oh, they said that night, see, Mom had all these girls. And the old Pappy Owens, the doctor on the avenue, he come down for my birth.
Right.
And they was upstairs and said that whenever I was born, Pappy Owens went running down the hollering, John's got a boy, John's got a boy. My dad was so proud because he had a boy.
Oh, wow.
You know, he was really proud that he had a boy, you know.
Yep.
Then as I was growing up, I can only remember him being sick, mostly.
Yeah.
He was pretty sick.
Sick with what? Do you know?
Stroke, high blood pressure. If he'd have had the medications they have today, he'd have lived a lot longer. But the high blood pressure destroyed his kidneys. He died of kidney failure.
Yeah.
He died a pretty tough death.
Around, how old was he? Around what year was that, do you
Well,
remember?
he was 57 when he died, and I was 13.
You were 13, so you
I
were
was
still
13
really
when he
young.
died. Yeah, I was pretty young. Yeah.
Wow.
So then I just grew up like a weed all through them alleys, you know,
Yeah.
getting into trouble as much as we could and all that stuff.
So that was it with Grandma. I mean, there was never any other kind of stepdad or anything like that.
Nothing.
She raised everybody
Nope.
by herself.
Nope, nobody. Nope.
Nope.
Nope. Then it ended up there right, I guess Lena, my youngest sister at home, got married first to Bill. And Pop did get to live to see Carol Jean, which was
Oh, he
Lena's
did?
oldest.
That's good.
And that
I
was
didn't know that.
probably 1941 that he did live to see Carol Jean.
Right.
But he was very sick then.
Yeah.
And
at least he
I
got to
can
see it.
remember one of the things, you know, things that stick in your mind, really stick in your mind. Whenever Pop was, when Pop died, I think they had to go call me and said, Pop's dying. And I was out somewhere playing, you know what I mean? I didn't really grasp You know, that was wild as could be. So they brought me upstairs in this back bedroom, and that's where where Granny and I first started when we got married. The same room, little bedroom.
That's where you guys lived?
That's where we started. But this was Pop's bedroom where he died, and they said Pop's about to die, and Pop died. And the funny part of it is, someone said, "What time is it?" I said 4:15. And then they come in there, would look like a basket. They put him in it, and they had all these 21 big steep steps.
Uh-huh.
And I was standing there watching him take him down them steps. He was almost like he sat up.
Really?
He almost fell completely, came forward and almost fell forward down on there. And you know what I mean? His body was so limp yet.
Wow.
And by golly, they almost, the whole Burks of them almost went down the steps.
Jeez.
With his body.
So then you were actually in the room when he passed away?
I was there.
You were in the room?
Yeah. And then after everybody cleared out, and the next day the clock still said 4:15.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like the time stopped. So then, so that was something that you saw coming, though. It wasn't sudden. You knew that he was
Pop
dying.
was sick a long time.
Yeah.
He was sick a good while.
Yeah.
Yeah, he started out with it, you know, and I can remember they told him, even back then, they said eat garlic, and I can remember him down in the grocery store, he would be chewing on garlic.
And, I bet Grandma loved that way he smelled.
My mother had a fit.
Yeah. So
and see now Annie was at 1 year, then we all lived in one. They had these upstairs, and each one of the families had their room, separate room. Well, me and Joe and Paul slept in one room. My sisters and the girls all slept in another room. And you know what I mean? And Ben and Marie had a room. My mom had a room and all that.
What was downstairs?
That was the restaurant, and that's what their business was.
That was their Italian restaurant that they had?
Well, it all started out as a grocery store. And they had a real thriving grocery store business going. And they had a big tin mill down below the subway in Virginia Avenue. They had a tin mill, and the tin mill
There's Granny.
It folded. The tin mill folded.
Huh.
And when the tin mill folded, our parents, I mean, all these people, they had all these people on tick, you know, that they'd buy a little and put it on their bill.
Yeah.
Well, whenever they went out, they didn't have no money to pay their bills.
Right.
And we got stuck with the works.
Wow.
So then later on, they got into a tavern. And they sold wine and beer and whiskey. And
I bet that went over well.
My grandma then every Thursday had spaghetti as a special, and we had all kind of people coming in. And they had, that was really a good specialty.
So my dates are bad. So when you guys went into the liquor, selling liquor and wine and stuff, was that after they had already legalized the selling of alcohol? Because it was outlawed there for a while with prohibition.
Well, that was in like the late 20s.
That was early on then.
That was prohibition.
Okay. So it was already legalized. Okay.
That was already legal then.
Right.
And they were already into it there in about the early 40s.
Okay.
So then in the 40s, I was going in high school. And then from up to 1946 when I graduated.
Where'd you go to high school?
Fort Hill High School.
Did you graduate in 4 years?
I graduated there in 46 after 4 years. And I mostly went to Fort Hill. I could have gone to LaSalle, but honestly, all the kids I grew up with,
went to Fort Hill.
All of them went to Fort Hill. And then by golly, it was quite a walk.
Yeah.
But we walked from right there at the subway in South Cumberland up to Fort Hill, walked to school every day.
Yeah.
Did
you play hooky a lot?
Yeah.
You did play hooky a lot?
Did we play hooky? Oh my. Yeah. Oh, this boy that got killed in Korea, Henry Harworth was one of the kids we played hooky with. And I said, hey, my dad, they had a little side grocery store too. And I said, let's play hooky tomorrow. So I think kids said, okay, we'll all play hooky. So I said, I'll get a whole bunch of food from down there in my dad's grocery store. I said, and you go upstairs and there's a back porch. You guys stand down in the yard, and I'll go down there and grab a bunch of stuff in a bag and bring it upstairs. And instead of trying to go out the back door, because Joe's mother and my mother and all of them are right there. They could catch you trying to get the food out. And so
Did you light that thing?
Yeah, is that okay? Is it not supposed to be lit?
The only thing is, it's almost down.
Okay, you want me to blow it out?
Yeah, blow it out. I'm gonna put a new one in.
Okay. All right. Hold on that note then, Pap. We'll stop over. Okay, you see the red light, right?
Red light's on.
Okay, so where were we? You were playing hooky from school.
Well, we decided to play hooky.
Okay, that didn't happen all the time.
I was going to get, well, you know, maybe a day or so, here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we used to tell them up there at Fort Hill it was a Catholic holiday, and when we didn't make it.
So did you sneak out of school, or did you just not go? You'd act like you're leaving house to go to school.
Oh yeah,
or you just...
we'd act like we were leaving house, and we'd end up down along the river.
Right, you just wouldn't go at all.
When we were boys like that, well, it's boys, but that's the way we would go. But
Everybody
anyhow,
does
I
that.
was getting a bunch of food together, and so Henry's down there, and it's dark, and he's down in the yard, a couple of the boys, and I'm dropping food down to them. See, and they're down there catching it. And I never give it a thought. I had a bag of flour, and whenever I threw the bag of flour,
It broke.
it busted. Oh, it busted.
Oh, no.
Oh man, flour all over the place. Poor old Henry. He was down there. He got killed in the Korean War.
Henry did?
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we would go down. We'd play hooky and get down along the river, along the Potomac River. It was like I can remember real steep sandy banks. And we put ropes up in the trees. Then we would take that rope and go way back and take a great big run, and then we'd leave go and just drop right in the river.
Right.
And then we'd lay there and we'd build a fire and make food. And there used to be ducks come swimming around. They came from all over, all these ducks. And one of the boys, Paul Dunn, was one of the boys that was with us. And whenever he was dying of cancer in the hospital, Granny and I went to see him on a Monday. And he said, John, he says, I looked at myself in the mirror yesterday, and I looked like I was in a concentration, one of them from the concentration camp.
Wow.
He was that bad off.
Yeah, from the radiation.
I mean, and just the cancer eating him up.
Yep.
He says, John, he said, when I get out of here, he said, will you do me a favor? Will you get an old .22 rifle like we used to do and take me down to the river and sit on the bank and watch the ducks swimming? He said, will you do that for me?
Huh.
I says, Paul, I promise.
Yeah.
If you get out of here, I will do that for you.
Yeah.
And I know, well, that was Wednesday he died.
Did he? So he never got out.
And Friday, we took him out to Cache Valley Road, the cemetery, to bury him. And I'm standing there on the bank, and there's a great big pond. And just as they were going to lower the casket, here come all these ducks swimming by.
Are you kidding me? That's
I
what he
said,
wanted
hey,
in the first place.
And I said, hey, Paul, there they are. There's your ducks, Paul.
Yep. Wow.
You know, sitting there and when we were boyhood friends. But he was really a good boy.
Yeah.
Really a good boy, Paul was.
So where did all the girls go to school then?
Well, they all went right there, St. Mary's. I went to St. Mary's grade school.
Okay.
And I went up till the 8th grade, then I went on to Fort Hill. But all my sisters, Lena, I don't think graduated. I'm pretty sure, but Julia and Anna did.
They did.
And Anna actually got a scholarship to go out to Kentucky, where the Ursuline sisters. And I wouldn't.
Huh.
Anna probably would have went in and been a nun, but Mom said, "You're needed here and
Yeah.
stay here. We need you here."
Huh.
And they kept the girls there. They had all these families, 2 families raised in one under one roof.
Right.
So therefore, you know, some of them helped do the washing, some did the house cleaning and the laundry, and you know, I mean, it was a lot to do when you had 2 families.
Right.
And each family had 4 on each side. That's 8 plus the parents were 12. There was 12 of them.
So then, was it? I guess after you got out of high school is when you joined the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't of age to get in the Army,
See,
though, right?
No, I had been bugging my mother. A lot of the kids, when I was in high school, they had their parents sign for them, and a lot of them got fake birth certificates and went into the war when they were 16.
Wow.
And that's what I tried to do. I tried to get my mother to sign for me then to go into the war, and she wouldn't sign. And then, as soon as I graduated, I was still 17. And you could get in there with parents' consent.
Right.
So then finally I talked her into signing the papers for me to get to go, you know, get into service. And then I joined, and that was 1946. And I know that I spent my 18th birthday with 6,000 men going overseas on the boat.
Wow. Well, they take you directly to boot camp immediately for a couple weeks, right?
Well, there, yeah, I went through boot camp.
Where's that? Where did you
Basic
go?
training in Aberdeen, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
They sent me into Aberdeen, Maryland, and we went through basic training. And right at basic training, as soon as we finished, buddy, we already had our order for overseas.
Where to?
To Japan.
Hmm.
And we got on that boat, and I remember I run into some of my high school buddies. They were cooking a Christmas dinner for us before we left, and some of them were boys I graduated with.
Huh.
I couldn't believe when I went through the chow line.
Wow.
And
so that was your first assignment in Japan. What was that like? What did you do over
well,
there?
I went over and they put me. Well, the boat dropped all the men in Korea, and then we went on down. While we was on our way over, the boat hit a typhoon,
Wow.
and we lost about 3 days. And boy, I mean to tell you right now, that ship went up straight up in the air and down and up and down to where that they'd go so far up in the air and down. Whenever it went down, the propellers would actually come out of the water, and the whole ship would just vibrate.
Wow.
And they said the front part of the ship cracked. And I was on E deck, and the next one down below, they had to bring the boys from F deck and split them out up through all the other A through E because it was the ship cracked.
It was flooding, and then they
It was
just seal it. They'll
starting
seal
flooding
that
there,
compartment
yeah.
off, right? That's
Yeah.
how they do it.
Seal her off.
Huh.
So then, but I got into Japan, and we went in. They assigned me to an outfit called the 27th Ordnance with the 1st Cavalry Division. And I stayed there my whole time till it was time to get discharged.
Which was how long?
That was, I think I was over there 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, then, what happened was I had got promoted up to the rank of sergeant. While I was there, I was running a great big shop operations, me and this Japanese fellow, Suzuki. And we would have all these operations going on, all that stuff. And so then what happened was they said, okay, World War II is over. Anyone that was drafted as of a certain date, we're sending everybody home that was drafted. Anyone that was in the Army has to re-enlist and start anew right now, so that they're starting off on a new slate and got rid of all the draftees from the war.
Right.
So then they said, you either got to re-enlist or go home. And so that sergeant told me, he said, you're going to get promoted. He said, if you stay, I'll put you up into the rank of tech sergeant.
Huh.
And you can be a shop supervisor or something like that.
And you were what, 19?
I was 18.
You were still 18.
Still 18. And he said, no, I guess I would have, because my 18th birthday, I spent on the boat. And then the 19th birthday, yeah, this was after my 19th birthday in December.
So that's a high rank for that age, though.
Yeah, I mean, I went clear up in rank good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To equal a buck sergeant. They called it a T. They were T ratings, like they call specialists now. They'd have a little specialist rating underneath your and I had 3 stripes.
Mm-hmm.
So then whenever I wrote home, I said to Anna, I'm going to re-enlist and stay here. And she said, please come home, your mother's old, and help me take care of your mother. So I decided to go home. And of all things, the Korean War broke out right after that. And I
Right.
was in the 1st Cavalry Division, and a greater majority of the 1st Cavalry Division got wiped out.
Wow.
They were overrun by the North Koreans. And I probably Anna writing me that letter to come home probably saved me from getting killed in Korea.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So then you came home. Did you enlisted? But if you could stay locally, or
Well, whenever I got home, I enlisted I joined the National Guard.
the reserves?
The
Okay.
National Guard first,
Oh, okay.
and I was in the National Guard for about 7 years.
And what did you do in the National Guard then? What is that?
Well, I started out as a Jeep driver, and I ended up within a couple years. Some of the old timers were leaving. They made me motor sergeant.
Is that where you got to drive Rocco around in the
That's
Jeep?
that's whenever they made me motor sergeant. Then I got a full-time job with the National Guard
Okay.
as a full-time civilian, and that's whenever I did all this with Rocco.
Okay. Let it fly. What did you
Yeah.
do for Rocco? How did that?
Well, his mother kept bugging me. Francis, every time she see me, Johnny, please get Rocco in the Army. I said, oh, crap. I said, you know, Johnny, please get Rocco in the Army.
Now Rocco's going to hear this probably, so watch.
Well, that's all right.
This is the truth.
It's the truth. I ain't lying. So then, well, I knew he couldn't pass the test. So I guess I got Rocco in there and got him scribbling his name maybe, or whatever.
Got him a few extra points on
And
the test.
then, you know what I mean, I just went ahead and fixed up the test just enough so he could pass.
Right.
Boy, I sent him away for basic training. Oh, they called me from Fort Knox, Kentucky, said, how'd this guy ever get in the Army? He said, this guy don't even know hardly how to read and write. How'd he pass the test? And then he's calling up his mother crying. He wants to come home. I thought, oh, man. And his mother called the chaplain at Fort Knox crying, got my Rocco go and all this stuff. And he couldn't, and they were going to said that he couldn't pass the grade to finish basic, and they were going to recycle him.
What's that mean? What's recycle?
That means that you got to start all over and go through basic again.
Oh, okay.
See, in other words, if you couldn't make it the first time and
you gotta go back
physically and all that, then you had to go through again. And then the commanding officer called the commanding officer in Cumberland, and the commanding officer in Cumberland said, hey, started raising Cain. How'd that guy get in here? How'd they ever let a guy like that get in the Army? And they asked me, I said, he must have did that multiple choice on the test, and I guess he guessed the right answer here and there.
He's a good guesser.
I was in hot water. They were calling from Fort Knox, raising Cain about Rocco.
Oh, gosh.
So finally, they sent him home. And then he hung around the armory, and I said he wanted to move a Jeep, and I think I had it sitting in a drill hall, and I think he drove it down to the end and ran into the wall.
So that was the end of him then?
That was the end of Rocco's destiny.
So that was in the National Guard, and then
that was in.
Go through.
Well, as soon as I got out of the
rest
Army
of your
now,
service. Then.
When I got back from the Army, out from overseas, that's whenever the story went that there was your daddy. The year that I got out was the year your daddy was born.
Okay.
See, that was 1948. And then, and that's where the story started of me going down there. Annie saying to me, Ann Caporale had a little boy. I'd like to see that little boy. Why don't you come along? And that's whenever the story came that me and Annie's walking up Springdale Street, going over to 3rd Street, and we're there talking, and she telling me about this little boy. She said, she says, it's a little late or something like that, and says, I don't want to go by myself. So, but Annie and I grew up like brother and sister. We was only a year apart. Even though she was a cousin, she was like a sister to me. I mean, we were close, like brother and sister. So that's whenever we went over there, and what I can remember, we went up these steps, and there was that little baby laying in that crib. And then I walked over and I looked down there, and that's when little did I know that someday that little baby right there would be the father of my grandchildren. That's ironic how you look there and and I thought, I said, now if I know now what I did, know then what I know now, I'd have put a pillow over him and stuffed him out and saved a whole lot of grief with everybody. But that actually was the truth. That really, and little did I know he'd someday be the father of my grandchildren.
Sitting in that crib. So that was 1948.
No, that was 1948.
So then where did your service go from that? When did you get into the reserves? Was the reserves
we went to a dance on Saturday night at the National Guard Armory. And back at that time, Millie's sister Violet, husband, had a thing there, a booth, asking people at the dance to join the National Guard. So me and my buddies were there, and we're having a couple here and a couple of drinks there. And he said, how'd you boys like to join the National Guard? We're half smoked up, big deal. Yeah, we'll join the National Guard. Never dreaming
that he'd hold you to
I was going to end it up 42 years later as a career with it. Never dreaming. And then went from the National Guard, and then they gave me a full-time job with the Guard. And I had that full-time job in 1960. And then I went over to the Army Reserve because they were federal jobs, and I got into federal civil service, federal retirement, federal benefits, federal hospitalization, where they didn't have it with the Guard back then.
Right.
And I went over, and then I was from 1960 to 1988. I stayed in the reserve and worked full-time with them and got a full-time job with the Army Reserve and retired through the Army Reserve full-time program.
So what kind of work did you do with the reserve?
I did enlistments. And I took care of the troops. When we went away anywhere, I had to house them, feed them, do all that stuff. And if we go away to fire on the ranges, plus I did all kind of enlistments. I guess in my period of time, from probably when I went in the National Guard, I had the same type of job.
Mm-hmm.
I would have said that easy 4,000 men went through me.
Wow.
And that was when they were drafting for the Korean War and the Vietnam War and all those ones that wanted to come into the reserve rather than get drafted. Well, that's when I processed them, and I processed. When I went to work with the reserve, there was 130 men in the unit, and I enlisted from 130 to 250. I did her all. I sent them away to basic training. I housed them, fed them, did the works. And this Dr. Davis, the dentist,
Mm-hmm.
he was one of the boys that went through me.
Was he?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
then we joined. We talked about joining the National Guard,
Mm-hmm.
and so it wasn't real long after that. I worked a little bit with my sister Julia and Jean in Virginia, and but before that, before that though, in 1948, this was November. My good buddy Elmo, and Elmo, I was so tickled. He called me a couple days ago, and called me up. I ain't heard from him in years.
Was he an Army buddy?
We grew up and run around together as boys,
Okay.
and we hunted together and fished together, and me and Elmo were like brothers. And so Elmo, but then I was down to see my sister Lena on Race Street, and Elmo lived on down the street from there, and me and him and Bill McCullough, we would go rabbit hunting and things like that together. So we're standing there on Race Street, and his grandmother lived in this great big brick home, and there was a guy on a ladder working on the gutter. And Elmo said, "You see that guy up there on that ladder?" He said, "He's from Little Orleans." And whenever I looked him up there, he said, "They have pretty good rabbit hunting down there." And he says, he invited us to come down rabbit hunting down there in Little Orleans.
Yeah.
He said, "Why don't we go down to Little Orleans tomorrow?" And I said, "Where in the hell is Little Orleans? I never heard of it." I never heard of it, Little Orleans. He said, "Boy," he said, "it's way down the road." I said, "All right, I got the car, I got the dog, we'll get the guns and we'll go down there tomorrow." So we picked up Roy. That's this fellow that was doing the work that lived down there at Little Orleans. So we got right down there and got out of the car, and we hunted the whole livelong day. Boy, it was cold. And it was a real night, and we had a real fine time. We had the dogs running, me and Roy and Elmo. And at the end of the day, he said, "Come on, my mother's got a nice big supper." Man, after hunting all day and cold, hungry, boy, we got up there, and this lady, it was Roy's mother.
Yeah.
Never knowed who the lady was.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a cook that was beyond, just outstanding. And me and Elmo, we just ate like hogs, And so then, all of a sudden, here comes Millie and Irene walking in the door. And they introduced me to that, and she came in, and we talked a while.
So they just lived in the neighborhood, and they just
No,
stopped in?
they must have walked from her mother's house up to there, I guess. And so they walked up and just to come up and visit. So then,
Bring a gift from Indiana.
oh, she brought a gift
Oh.
from her aunt out in Indiana to her
Okay.
aunt. And so Roy's mother, they called her Cook because she was such a good cook. They gave her a nickname as Cook.
Huh.
And boy, she earned the name, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I think Melly was coming back up to Cumberland to go to work. And I said, well, come on. You can ride with us, or someone would have to take her. So then I guess whenever we brought her up, I guess whenever either in the car or when she get out, I said, how about a date? She said, okay. And we've been together ever since.
Where did
That
you
was
go on your
November
first...
the 15th, 1948.
November the 15th,
That's the first day of rabbit season.
Do you remember where you went on your first date, or?
Oh, God knows where.
No.
God knows. We used to go. We went to dances and everything. And Granny never drank. She never was a drinker or nothing like that. But we went to dances and back and forth over a couple years, and we ended up getting married. And in 1951, Cindy was born. And from there, then we started our own housekeeping right there in the very, and I was telling you, the very same room, we went and stopped to live at my mother's house, and the very same room where Pop died was where they gave us that bedroom.
You guys lived in that bedroom. Now, Mom was born first.
Yeah.
Right?
And then John.
Then Uncle John.
And then Teresa 7 years later.
Were you still living on the avenue when they all three,
John
did they all
was,
three live with
yeah.
you there?
John and Teresa, I was still living on the avenue when, let's see, was I living on the avenue? 53, 1960. No, maybe I was working, I had a short time of a couple of years I worked at Pittsburgh Plate.
Mm-hmm.
John was born, Cindy was born at the avenue, and then John was born at the avenue, and then we bought the home out on the Valley Road in 55.
This house. This house in 55?
1955.
So you've been here, wow.
Since
then.
55.
So almost 40 years. Or
Yeah.
almost 50 years.
Yeah, we've been here in 1955.
How, off the top of your head, do you remember how, were any of the kids ornery? Was Uncle John ornery?
He was a real good boy.
How about Mom and
Oh,
Teresa?
your mother was pretty good. She got up in high school and got to run around with all of her girlfriends.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. You know, I mean, they were good kids. They were just a little on the wild side, and they conducted themselves once in a while. I still don't know how all the whiskey went out of them bottles that I had as, souvenir bottles.
Yeah.
And everybody claims that the whiskey dried up.
Yeah.
But I still think when they had a couple parties when Granny and I were going, I think someone got into it.
Or it's happened out at our house where the whiskey turns into iced tea. That happens sometimes too. It's a miracle from God.
I think Pap had something to do
Pap had a little bit to do with it. Well,
with it.
so
He helped empty him and blamed it on the kids.
so then who was the first one to meet somebody? I guess my mom was.
Your mom was.
And then did you know Dad from around Cumberland or?
Oh yeah, we knew Gus. We seen him here and there, and never dreaming,
Yeah.
that they would end up getting married.
What kind of reputation did he have around town? Was he
he had a reputation for not having a reputation. But I didn't know Gussie that well at all, and then.
So when did she bring him home? When did you say, oh God, when did she bring him home to meet
Oh God,
everybody?
that I don't remember really. You know what I mean? I guess they was off and on and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
So she brought him out to meet you guys though
Then
at some point?
she come out and they got together, and then we had a wedding in a St. Patrick's Church. And you see, your grandfather Dave Caporale was real close friends with Father Linus.
Yeah.
And Father Linus, Gus told me that Dave Caporale, when he wanted to go to confession, Father Linus and him would ride around in a car, and Dave Caporale would do his confession to Father Linus. And said that whenever he got the bakery over your grandfather, first time he was remodeling, I think the bakery, he said that he was, they were doing a remodel, and he went upstairs, and he must have stepped on something, and fell down through the ceiling.
Jeez.
At the bakery. Well, before that, Father Linus came in and blessed the bakery, and he fell through the ceiling. So then they remodeled again and started working again. Father come in and blessed it, and this time the bakery caught on fire.
Oh boy.
So then he told Father Linus, he said, when I get done this time, don't come in and bless the bakery this time. He said, 2 times is enough.
So Dad was working at the bakery, I take it.
Well, off and
after
on.
they got married.
Dad working at the baker was like some of you boys. He didn't always show up on time, I don't think. And him and the old man went round and round. And he was running around with that gang like Bing and all that bunch.
Yeah.
You know, so your grandmother Ann can tell you more about Gus and his days of running around. And Cindy, whenever she got into high school, then she got a job, and we ended up getting that little yellow Ford Mustang convertible.
Yep, she wants one of those again. She wants to get one of those again.
Oh, there they go. I'd be going down the road. There would be that whole gang of girls. And I remember the one girl eating a banana and throwing the banana out the back of I was following them.
Oh, gosh.
And so then, evidently one time she was speeding. And she got caught. And the state cop was a good friend of, Dick Brown and I were a good friend.
Yeah.
So then this state cop says, hey, Brown, he says, I got Divico's daughter. He said, what do you want to do about it? And in other words, I could have just said, you know,
let her off. Write her a warning.
See? So Dick said, hey, he said, so-and-so got Cindy for speeding, said she was going down the highway, and all these girls in there, and said she was flying, they're laughing, and said if they'd have wrecked and turned that car over, he'd killed them all. And I was mad. I always told them if they get caught doing something like that, I'm going to tear up their license. Well, then Dick said, what do you want to do? What do you want me to do about it? I says, time to throw the book at her.
Yeah.
And he did, and she had to go to driving school and all that stuff. Yeah.
Does she know that you said throw the book at her, or is that still a kept secret?
Oh, I'm sure that she knowed. Yeah. I could have got her off.
Yeah.
But I said, nope, throw the book. Give her a lesson.
So after they got married, then where did they live? Did they live with you?
They went up on the very same apartment that whenever we was on the upstairs apartment on the avenue, and it was on there was two apartments up there. Well, then your mother, or Millie and I got the apartment. Then after we left and bought this house, then in later years, then when they got married, they took that apartment.
Okay.
And that's where David was born, at that apartment up there.
David was born. How about Uncle John? When did he? Do you remember when he met Aunt Linda and how that?
Well,
happened?
John, he was in this here Christian group after he graduated. He was in this Christian school, and then she had been a nurse in Pittsburgh, and then somewhere in all this Christian fellowship, they met. And that's how they finally ended up getting married.
And then he took work in West Virginia.
Yeah,
right?
He worked. Gosh, I guess he worked over there on construction. He worked a good while on construction somewhere in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And then worked for a couple local contractors here and there. And then that's whenever he left, and he went to he had graduated from forestry school in Allegheny College. And the day he graduated, he said, I'm giving my life up to the Lord. And I said, why didn't you do that 2 years ago? Rather than
before you had to pay for it.
Put you through 2 years of college and you're going to go. So anyhow, that's what he ended up in the ministry from
right.
now on.
And then
church here, church there, Ohio.
Jumping around. And then Aunt Teresa with Uncle Frank. She met him. How did that happen?
She must have met Frank. The only thing I know, she was in about this motorcycle crazy business.
Yeah.
And they went somewhere and met somewhere at one of these big things where they get together.
Yeah.
And then she brought him here, and we got to meet him and all. And then he was really good to Teresa in all respects, except you know what I mean. He had that problem.
Yeah.
And he couldn't let it go, and so they had to end up breaking up.
They didn't get to. How long were they together? Do you have an idea?
Oh well, I guess Andy was about 5 or 6 whenever they broke up, and
No, he wasn't that old.
you don't think?
No.
Well, whatever.
So how long were they together, Gran? How long do you think?
Well, they were married a while before.
They were married a good while before Andy was
before
born.
he was born, 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay, so they might have been together 7 years or so, something like
Somewhere
that.
like that.
So then she met Big Jim. Where did she meet that big
That's
man
a good question.
Gran, do you know?
She met him, I think, in Hagerstown, probably at a dance or something.
Oh, okay. So then she met Big Jim when she lives in Martinsburg.
Yep, and they were there living in Martinsburg, and then her and Jim got married, And really, Teresa, Jim's been a good husband for her.
Yep.
So everybody's pretty well settled down. You know, when we got here in 1955, one thing that always sticks in my mind, when we were leaving the apartment in South Cumberland, John had a little toy airplane. I'll never forget this. And the little toy airplane, when you turned it over, the edges of the plane, it wasn't like it was completely wrapped around to where the metal was all closed up. It had edges that stick up. So I said, let's get rid of that airplane. I said, that looks dangerous. And we was loading to move out here. And John was running around in diapers. So then, just about that time, by the time we moved out here, the airplane ended up there on the kitchen floor. He come running through and fell and cut a great big gash on his knee from that doggone airplane. So the thing that always sticks in my mind was we took him into the old Allegheny Hospital.
I think it was laying on a table.
I'm pretty sure it was on the floor and he fell on it.
I don't know.
Anyhow, he got cut. And so we went in there and I took him in and we went in the emergency room and the doctor looked things over. He says, okay, Dr. Briggs, he says, please bring me 3 nurses. He says, 1 to hold down the boy and 2 to catch the papa because he's going to faint. I was pretty shook up and probably turned white, and I might have been going to. And I thought, he said, go take a walk. I walked out of that hospital, and it was on Decatur Street there, and I walked all the way to Frederick, and I could still hear John crying all the way up there. So it's a good thing I got out of there.
Wow.
So then he got cut on that, that was one of the things of memories.
They just stitched him up, huh?
Stitched him up. Brought him home. We put up a nice great big fence in the yard. Dug the post holes all by hand, put up a fence to keep him in. And there he come out of there in diapers and went walking out and climbed right up over the fence. So after all that work putting in that fence, he climbed up the fence and almost climbed over it. So that was a lost job.
Yeah.
But then we've been here ever since. We've raised all the kids here and had the family here, and we're still here.
Can you remember where you were, or any circumstances surrounding any of the grandkids where you were when I was born, or Dave, or Joe, or anything or Andrea, or any of the girls? Anything stick out in your mind?
Whenever the kids were born, not really.
Were you
whoever
smoking
went to
cigars?
the hospital, I never got around much of going to the hospital. I guess Granny did.
Yeah.
But as far as me goes, I never got to the hospital much when all the kids were born. And I can remember, though, that poor little Tony, when he was a little baby, he got sick and he was in the hospital. And they had needles running in his head because his veins were so little. And it just made your heart sick to see that little baby laying there.
Yeah.
Poor little Tony.
Huh. I don't remember that. What was wrong with him? Do you remember?
I can't remember what it was. They had to feed him intravenously, and he was so little they couldn't get needles in his hands anywhere, and they had to put him in his head.
Wow.
They thought they was going to have to put him in his head, but they put him in his ankle.
Well, is there
Did they do that?
Can you think of any? Does our family on either side that you know of have any kind of any diseases in the family that you can think of? Any heart disease, anything like that that you know of?
No, just my sister Julia was the first one to die on my side, and she had cancer of the lungs and a tumor of the brain, and she died. And then none of us passed away until my mother passed away in 1986.
Yeah, and she lived on Virginia
down
Avenue.
on Louisiana
Avenue.
Yeah.
That's right.
She lived with Joe and her sister and Uncle Ben. They all lived there. And Marie passed away first, then Uncle Ben, then Mom. And then they moved they stayed there till they died. And Anna stayed there till she got in this apartment down here in downtown Cumberland.
How good of a cook was your mother that you
My
remember?
mother was a wonderful cook. My mother and my Aunt Marie, Joe's mother, they would have people come there on Sunday dinners. And I mean to tell you, them women, they would be carrying great big trays of food. Unbelievable the way they cooked.
Yeah.
Oh man, they really were. Then my mother and my Aunt Marie, they used to sell spaghetti have spaghetti dinners there at the restaurant. And your grandmother helped serve a lot of them meals and everything like that in the restaurant.
So tell me the story. How did the wild game dinners get started? Where did that come
Well,
from?
old Bud Law, my old buddy, old Bud, we was hunting buddies. And Millie got on to learning how to make really good deer steaks.
Uh-huh.
And old Bud, we said, by golly, we ought to have ourselves a dinner, a nice big deer steak dinner once a year. And we picked around Washington or Lincoln's birthday around February the 15th. We decided to have it. It started out with maybe Bill Keg and Bud and I. We had some steaks, and the next thing you know, we invited this guy, we invited that guy, this guy, that guy. So, cut her down.
What were we talking about? Where were we? I can't remember.
Now,
so much stuff.
You're younger than me. Your memory's better than mine. Where was I?
Wild game dinner.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't just deer steak.
It started out with just deer steak, really, in general.
A bunch of hunter guys
then
coming
one
over.
by one, somebody would say, "Boy, I heard about that wild game dinner there at your home, and Millie's cooking. How about could I come?" Well, there would be this one. Then there'd be that one. Be this one, that one, this one, that one. And it ended up there was at one time, the last wild game dinner, I think it was 23 men here. Now can you picture 23? This thing right here opens up. And I could get enough tables to where by the time I put a chair at the end, it would come to about, well then, and even the kids, Gus would come out and eat. Mm-hmm. And the kids would come out and eat, but then they didn't come to the table. David did get in on some of the wild game dinners, and then so then we would have, and different people would bring all different kind of stuff too, and Granny would start cooking 2 weeks ahead of time. I know, getting the meatballs ready, deer meatballs for the spaghetti. She would make deer meatballs, and it would be spaghetti or rigatonis. Plus she'd have piles of deer steak. And squirrel.
Where did you shoot most of those deer? Where do you do most of your hunting?
All over, everybody. They were, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, all over.
Who are your boys out in Pennsylvania? What are the name of those boys?
That's the Cessnas out there.
How did you meet those boys? How did that come
Johnny Cessna came here one day and heard that I sold guns. And Johnny he said, "Why don't you come out after he bought the gun?" Well, no, his uncle Clifford brought Matthew out here to buy a 30-30 rifle for deer season. He brought when Matthew was a little boy. And that started with Clifford. Then Clifford told Johnny that I had guns. Then Johnny come out, and Johnny invited me out there to meet all them. And you met all them boys and all the whole gang of Cessnas out there. That's how we got started with the Cessnas. And they have been very good and have taken care of me very well.
Yeah. They got a lot of land. How about, they have a lot of land out there, huh?
Well, they keep buying and buying. They own from the Pennsylvania line on out what is called Hidden Springs. They own that one whole side of the mountain there. Plus all over the county and state, they might own as high as 2,000 acres of ground.
Wow.
Yeah. So I hunted and I met Bill Hinkle going in to get my hair cut, and I heard he was a great bird hunter. I told him I'd like to get together with him sometime and go bird hunting. And I got him into the military reservation down in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. And boy, we got into some most beautiful ring-necked pheasants that you could ever want to see. I mean, Bill and I really got into them big time. That's where Bill and I became, and then I went over to his place, killed deer over to his place. You'd never believe what he and I killed over the years in that place. You'd never believe.
That's where you took us to ride the three-wheeler all the time, right?
Yeah, over
shoot the
Bill's.
gun.
Yeah, he was a very. In fact, his wife said to me, she says, "Bill never did have a brother, but she said you was a brother to Bill."
Yeah.
Said that's how close of good friends we got to be, me and Bill.
Where did you take us that time when Joe flipped the three-wheeler?
That was out Jerry Sliders, down at Lower Town Creek.
Is it Campbell Brown right? Or am I seeing things?
It's just a reflection.
Okay.
It's a reflection in the glass.
I
It's a little angled, but yeah, it's burning right.
All right.
That's what I thought too. I looked at it for a second.
Okay.
But that's where we went down Jerry Sliders and run the 3-wheelers.
Jerry
down
Sliders.
there. Yeah, that was Lower Town Creek.
Yep.
And but getting back to the wild game dinner, everybody would bring their own refreshments as far as drinks. I would supply the. Well, they'd even bring their own.
Well, you guys didn't
mix.
drink any alcohol or beer
Well,
or anything, did you?
We were all known to have a nip before the dinner, you know, and maybe we might have a drink before dinner started.
Yeah.
But everybody would bring their own, and with 23 guys around his house, little house,
You can go through
you
it.
couldn't believe. But this great big long table, and Granny would be cooking for weeks really when you get down, preparing and get ready. You had rabbit, you had squirrel. Some guys brought elk. We even had bear one time.
Wow.
Wild boar.
Wild boar, muskrat. Hardball brought out muskrat,
Wow.
and wild turkey, and pheasant, and
Squirrel.
ducks,
Rabbit.
squirrels and rabbits, and ducks. Boy, she cooked some They killed some ducks on a pond one time and brought them here for the dinner. And I'm telling you, they were delicious. Boy, how she ever fixed them, I don't know. But everybody raved, and they was fighting over that wild duck.
Yeah.
And so then there was and all the guy would sit around. Bud would call up and say, "I want to come help get ready for the dinner."
Bud who? Bud
Bud
Franklin?
Law.
Oh,
Bud
Bud
Law.
I was thinking
Old
Bud.
Bud. Well, Billy would say, "Don't go getting him out here too early, because when he'll start drinking, and the dinner ain't till 5:30, 6 o'clock, and Bud would be out here 11 o'clock in the morning, getting fired up." Boy, I mean, he looked forward to that. But everybody, all these guys, and that's what happened. I mean, you turn around, it got to the point I had to keep turning people down.
It's a shame it had to end. That was a great tradition.
Well, it was too much on her.
Yeah.
I
You need to
know
get
that.
somebody else to cook. Granny can't handle
Yeah,
it.
but everybody wants her.
Yep.
They want her deer steak.
You gotta share your special touch, Granny.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you one thing. The only thing I remember anybody bringing was